This is the second part of the recording for Who's Minding the Mind, and we did up to paragraph 4. Now we're going to continue starting with paragraph 5. Okay, so in paragraph 5 we start getting an explanation of what could possibly be going on with this phenomenon that we've been learning about, the priming that causes people to react unconsciously and modify their behavior, right? So let's start by reading the paragraph and see what we can understand. The give and take between these unconscious choices and our rational conscious aims. So we have two things here that we're going to be comparing and discussing. Right? The unconscious choices and our conscious mind that we believe makes our decisions for us. Give and take is a phrase, means kind of negotiating. That's sort of a meaning of give and take, means you do a little something, I do a little something, all right? The give and take between these unconscious choices and our rational conscious aims can help explain some of the more mystifying, and the word mystery, mystifying realities of behavior. For example, like, okay, so they make a statement that there is a potential explanation to some behaviors, and that explanation is understanding how our two consciousnesses work. Like, for example, how we can be generous one moment and petty the next. So we're acting in two seemingly opposite ways. Or act rudely at a dinner party when convinced we're emanating charm. Okay, so this is they're similar but different. One is actually acting differently, and one is not being aware of how we are acting. We think we're being charming and we're actually being rude. Goes on to explain in this paragraph. All right, he explains his main idea. This main idea is the give and take. So now he's given explanations and examples. According to John A. Barr, professor of psychology at Yale and a co-author with Lawrence Williams of the Coffee Study, which was presented at a recent psychology conference. Right, so this is all background to who this person is and what his involvement was with that first study. Psychologists have been finding that these unconscious behavioral guidance systems are continually furnishing suggestions through the day about what to do next, and the brain is considering and often acting on those, all before conscious awareness. All right. So let's go and just take a moment to understand this sentence, okay? Because this is basically, at this point, what we're understanding is to be an explanation of this phenomenon, of what is going on with priming and what is going on with the give and take between these two consciousnesses, the unconscious and our rational conscious. So, psychologists have been finding, as a way to say that there have been studies, right? Earlier we talked about how there were many studies, and this is continuing. How do psychologists find things? They run studies and they have findings. They have been finding that these unconscious behavioral guidance systems are continually, all the time, continuously furnishing suggestions about what to do next. It's constantly coming up from the unconscious, what should I do, what should I do? And the brain is considering and acting on these, all before consciousness. So there are three things that are happening. We could say almost three things in a series. One, the unconscious guidance systems are offering suggestions. Two, the brain is considering these suggestions And 3, it's acting on this even before we are aware of what's going on. Sometimes these goals are in line with a person's conscious intentions, and sometimes they're not. Again, 2 things going on here. Sometimes these behaviors are what we actually intend or want to do, and sometimes they're not. Okay? So, priming the unconscious is the second section of this article. The idea of subliminal influence, here's a term that has come up, not for the first time, but now it seems that we may understand, get an explanation of what this subliminal influence means, because it is at the beginning of a paragraph, and when it's at the beginning of the paragraph, it may be the main idea of the paragraph and we need it to be explained. This idea of subliminal influence has a mixed reputation among scientists because of a history of heavy advertising, hype, and apparent fraud. So, mixed reputation. Is it good? Is it a good reputation, a bad reputation? It's mixed, right? And then they tell us why. Because explains this. So we have a mixed reputation. Why do we have a mixed reputation? And the because connects the two. In 1957, an ad man named James Vickery. What's an ad man? Mad Men? Did anybody watch the show Mad Men? It's about advertising in the 60s. An ad comes from the word advertising. So a man who deals with advertising, marketing. An ad man named James Vickery claimed to have increased sales of Coca-Cola and popcorn at a movie theater in New Jersey by secretly flashing the words, "Eat popcorn and drink Coke," during the film, too quickly to be consciously noticed. All right, so we have to break down what it is that actually happened here, right? Because, why? Because in the first sentence it was said that this issue has a mixed reputation because of this history of advertising apparent fraud, and now they're giving us an example. So this example is important to understanding this first sentence. So what happened? So James claimed something. To claim something is not to prove it or to have proof or evidence. It's simply to say this is what happened without showing why that it actually did. What did he claim? He claimed to increase sales of various products, right? And how did he do it? What did he claim? Secretly flashing words during the film to encourage people to act in a certain way. And these were flashed too quickly to be consciously noticed. Too quickly to be consciously noticed, right? But advertisers and regulators doubted his story from the beginning. So again, we have the word but is referring to what came before, and it is in contrast. It's any good. It comes in contrast to what came before. Advertisers and regulators doubted his story from the beginning. Right? They doubted it right away. And in 1962 interview, remember this happened in 1957, so now in 1962, Mr. Vickery acknowledged, right? He said, yes, this is what I did. To acknowledge is to admit. He acknowledged that he had falsified the findings to gain attention for his business. Okay, now we understand why they were talking about, in the first sentence, a history of hype and fraud. Okay, so he has admitted that he falsified, from the word false, he falsified information, and what he claimed was not true. later studies. So here we go back to studies. Constantly, this article brings us back to research studies. Later studies show that subliminal improvement has no effect. This is what later studies show. Right? So let's go now and look at some of the questions that we have left. All right, so we answered questions 1 through 4. This should be 5, I think. Well, it's different in yours. Apparently there's a numbering mistake. So in paragraph 5, the question is, what is another term from earlier in this text that for unconscious behavioral guidance system? Well, we talked about that. Neural software, right? They, here we go. Where is it? Here we go. In paragraph 5, we talked about that, right? What is the name given to the type of advertising that James Vickery supposedly conducted in 1957? Subliminal advertising. Subliminal influence, subliminal advertising. We know it was advertising, so we can say it was subliminal advertising, right? So I'm going to stop here. I did questions, well, 5 and 6, right? On this page it's 4 and 5. I did questions 5 and 6, and I'll continue on the next recording.